Hello and welcome to all of you participating in today's webinar. My name is Zana Budima. I am the Kosovo Country Manager for ABC Tech Group, and my today's role will be to facilitate this live webinar, which is co-organized by the Association of Microfinance Institutions of Kosovo and ABC Tech Group. It opens up a very important topic of digital transformation of the microfinance and non-bank financial sector. So when we say important, it is because in today's world, the microfinance institutions are pushed to transform themselves digitally, partially due to the enthusiasm of the industry experts and perhaps investors, as well as the potential threat of being, let's say, left behind by other service providers, such are fintechs, for instance, that are impacting the traditional microfinance market. But also, due to this global pandemic, clients are quickly adapting to new ways and new habits and are becoming more prone to use technology for various services that need to be delivered quickly and reliably, and often with little or no direct contact with an institution. So, with a growing worldwide consumer demand for financial services on one hand, and the microfinance sector in the emerging markets is, of course, no exception. And on the other hand, dealing with the growing number of clients that are now having more complex demands are a challenge for many MFIs. So this is why, as we've already announced, in this webinar, we will discuss the benefits of the digital transformation, what can be digitalized, and how would such a transformation look like for a microfinance institution. As the digital transformation is a broad topic, for this webinar, we have worked jointly with the Association of the Microfinance Institutions of Kosovo and utilized the already existing digital transformation framework that was developed by the Microfinance Center in Poland. And we identified challenges of today's MFIs and addressed some of these core business areas in today's webinar. So we are very confident that the webinar will be of value to all of you. Without further delay, I would like to give the floor to the Director of the Association of Microfinance Institutions in Kosovo, Mr. Arsim Bruchaj.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thank you for that comprehensive introduction, I would say. I will also use the opportunity to thank you and the ABC Tech team for basically supporting us in this exercise. Very quickly, I would just like to know that AMIC assembles traditional microfinance institutions and all MFIs are fully licensed and supervised financial institutions for all areas of their operations. Just some figures, we currently serve around 100,000 clients and we operate around 200 million in loan portfolio. Equally, we do this with our excellent 1,100 employees. Again, I'm here as the not tech expert, but rather as a policy and industry sort of expert. And I guess that the digital transformation is a not new theme for anyone. I think on this list who are participating here. I think the digital transformation is the buzzword of the time. but still, as Microfinance Association, we're working with members and with partners to bring this theme as a priority in origin and involve all the other stakeholders. As you correctly mentioned, and as we all experience, the COVID-19 global pandemic situation has put pressure and the urgency to digitize become more and more evident. As I recall working with my board and with my colleagues in the industry, we all recall those efforts to communicate with clients while there were restrictions and movements and other self-imposed social interactions. For setting the agenda, I mean, microfinance institutions Kosovo is only credit-only non-bank financial institutions, and they serve a specific category of clients which basically aim for a balanced social and economic result. That said, as a business, basically, lending is the second wave of digitized financial products, and as compared to payments, which is the first adopters in terms of general digitalization in terms of the offerings, but still there are some universal aspects such as client onboarding that all financial institutions can at least prepare to undertake. Really, it is my thinking that since within this peer of participants, we as microfinance will have to either become some sort of hybrid fintechs or lending fintechs, or achieve a well-balanced tech and touch approach, or really we're just going to experience a situation where we are not ready, we're not digitized, and then someone comes to market and just wipes up all our clients as such. As you rightly said before, and while preparing for this webinar, we have sort of done a simple survey on the, let's say, MFI readiness and MFI priorities, and what can be sort of digitized and where the digital transformation should give some sort of priority. And it appears that there are some themes and some areas where digital, also in Kosovo, given the context, digital transformation can sort of be undertaken. In particular, this is mostly related to the client communication, client acquisition, and client onboarding, and basically marketing. Some other areas, excuse me, some other areas of business and operations are let's say and accept it harder to digitize, but still as time passes by and probably will be ready. In short, I would just label that there are two broad enabling factors to digital transformation, and I don't think this is a new statement for anyone, but it gives us sort of a flow to the theme. On this macro enabling factors, what I would say, I would distinguish on the overall quality and access to public information infrastructure, legal base, and the overall client tech capital. While with tech capital or client tech capital, I mean access to internet, smart device, but also financial literacy and client sage. And on the second, basically, group of enabling factors or determinants of transformations, it's really MFIs, resources management, and overall transformation strategy. In Kosovo, I think overall Kosovo demographics and internet penetration indicate for considerable potential. I think the internet penetration, even as compared to EU and Western Balkans, is distinguishably similar, and in some respects even better. Kosovo is characterized by a high share of young age population, which is sort of a combination which can serve well and indicate a potential. Of course, as we embark on this journey, we all have to sort of estimate the associated risks, and particularly in terms of increased financial inclusion, basically. Also important, the Kosovo is an EU aspiring country. I mean, it's a potential EU candidate country. And usually what we do, I mean, as a signature to the Stabilization Association agreement, we will copy-paste EU chapters on all matters of market regulation and financial regulation per se. In that sense, digital identity, GDPR, and PSD2 are all sort of known themes. Again, on those MFI strategy and MFI's resources, I think this is where I will stop. But yes, it's costly to engage in digital transformation, and a well thought process should be sort of put forward for each of the MFIs. And I think this is a good moment that I really pass the word to you and to Irfan to lead us to basically some technicalities of digital transformation.
For the overview. Just before giving the floor to today's presenter, in your screen on the right-hand side, you should see a chat tool that would be open during the entire webinar. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat during the entire session. These questions will be shared with the presenters that will then in turn answer them during the Q&A session. And another note, and to follow up what the director said, we do understand that for implementation for some of the features that we will present today, there should be a legal infrastructure that would allow this. And in the majority of the countries participating today in this webinar, with the pandemic, this legal framework has become a priority for many governments. And having said this, we would like to point out that in today's webinar, we will focus on the digital transformation from a technical viewpoint, and of course, understanding that the legal framework will soon be in place. Or, such is the case in Kosovo, the implementation of the existing legal framework will be better defined. Now, to dive deeper on the possibilities that the technology can offer, I would like to introduce you to Irfan Nurkanovic, Business Unit Manager for ABC Tech Group. Irfan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dana. So I will briefly appear on the camera before switching the focus to the actual presentation. So hi, and once again from my side, for joining us today for this webinar on digital transformation of the microfinance and non-bank financial sector. As you have already heard, my name is Irfan, and I'm Business Unit Manager at ABC Tech Group in charge of development of products for digital experience in financial domain. ABC Tech Group is primarily recognized as a technology provider with the goal of helping financial institutions and, in general, existing players and newcomers in fintech world to navigate today's challenges, offering guidance through digital transformation as technology partner of choice. And most recently, we've been working on Leonis Digital, a retail and SME digital banking and payment solution for web and mobile applications. So to actually start this discussion, the obvious first question is, what is it that makes this challenge of digital transformation so interesting? Of course, in this day and age, it's really hard to go forward without immediately tying the answer to one of the keywords of 2020, and that is COVID-19, as we have already heard. You see, digital transformation as a topic and a challenge and even an opportunity for some businesses is here for many years now. But in 2020, it went from being nice to have to must have for many organizations and businesses, regardless of industry or business domain. And that is largely due to key changes that occurred this year under the influence of COVID-19 on our daily lives, on our businesses, from customer behavior and availability to changes in logistics, supply chains, and of course, public health protocols and policies, which vary from country to country, even from city to city. So key changes that can be identified in 2020, which many organizations and businesses must come to terms with in the following period, basically manifest as follows. First one is employee experience. With significant portion of workforce now working remotely, employee experience of digital technology has gone from nice to have to being actually the only way that we can operate. Email usage has skyrocketed, as well as audio and video call conferences and other tools of such type. At the moment, virtually every job is more tech-enabled than it was a couple of months ago due to either remote work, changing customer needs, government restrictions, or a host of other factors. This is creating tech support needs at an unprecedented scale. And well, even this webinar is proof that we have started to embrace these changes and understand their importance. With changes to the way offices, branches, and meetings are operated during the pandemic, the cost of operations has increased, and at the same time, its performance is limited from government to, let's say, fear factor-induced limitations. And finally, last but not least, safety of employees and customers was put in focus. With automation of business processes or part of them, significant savings both in time and money have become a possibility, and for some businesses also a necessity. And we have also noticed a trend of prioritizing a working system over a perfect system. Now, what this actually means, digital transformation was often looked at as an enormous obstacle that required months, if not years, of planning, perfect timing, wholesome changes. However, with a full-blown crisis such as pandemic this year, many organizations are adopting the good enough approach in order to prevail, leaving the standard of perfection to be met through iterations and through phases, rather than trying to make everything perfect from the get-go. Of course, I'm not saying you should be adopting half solutions and just wing it approach, so to say, but it is important to consider why you are digitalizing before you decide what you will digitalize at first. So now that we have mentioned digital transformation a dozen of times, let's try to define it in several ways. What actually makes up digital transformation? Well, the term may sound like a complex and convoluted concept, but the actual results are pretty easy to understand, and we've been experiencing them for years now and are seeing them every day at accelerated pace. For example, at individual level, digital transformation might be something as efficient as electronic health records in medical or wellness industries. Just transition of digital records to make data more accessible and faster to process increases the likelihood of providing better service as health professionals. So there are a couple of things actually that come into play here. First, of course, is integration of digital technology into all areas of business, fundamentally changing the operation and delivery of value to customers. An example of that is you sit down in a coffee shop, and while you're making an order, coffee shop employee is typing in your order in a phone app or some other handheld device. Someone on the other side of the coffee shop is already receiving and preparing your order, while business benefits from having all the orders actually stored in a digital way and ready for analysis, making it easy to see when the sales are booming, when the most donuts are sold throughout the day, etc. So this is quite a basic example, but in a nutshell, it is integrating digital technology in order to provide added value to the business. Next up, it requires a certain culture change. To walk away from long-standing business processes in favor of new practices that provide more value. Now, an obvious example that comes to mind, at least in my case, is when I get to hospital to see a doctor or something. I still encounter many times the old school centralized authority kind of doctor who will rely on pen, paper, and stethoscope until his retirement and would rather retire than lay hands on the keyboard. So obviously that kind of culture change is necessary in order to adopt new practices and to evolve further. It is, of course, a lengthy process, and it will evolve with the organization shifting and adapting to changing end goals. At first, for example, in MFIs, you might consider just using digital onboarding, at least to some extent, and it immediately takes a significant workload off of employees and start building up a digital database. Then once you have actionable data, you might consider different approaches to see, for example, start polling the customers to see where their interests are and customize the next step with the greatest return of investment in short term, and then continue building on top of that progress. So basically, it consists of customer experience, operational agility, culture change, employee enablement, and technology integration at any or all levels. So let's see what can actually be digitalized. As I said earlier, there are many examples all around us, but let's focus first on a couple of these. First off, we have customer experience. There are many things that affect customer experience, including digital onboarding, application for product or service, digital interaction channels, self-management, availability of a service, etc. Then we have, of course, the offering of products and services, reviewing orders or product or service applications, approving or rejecting, basically moving the entire communication digitally. And then we have the inner workings of the organization, collaboration and operations, breakdown of roles and responsibilities down to privileges to certain actions and data, archiving in digital means, integrating with customer management systems, with document management systems, or basically any other third-party service for added value. So there are many aspects that can actually be digitalized. In this webinar, we'll mostly focus on the customer-facing digital experience. And now that we are one step closer to this topic, when we start talking about customer experience, we need to take a look at the entire customer journey. We are obviously starting with building up awareness and consideration among potential customers for a service or a product that we are offering. Then we have the possibility of onboarding a customer. We have the possibility to apply for a service, and then we have the retention and advocacy. So let's see how this plays out in a traditional and parallel, let's say, digital world. We'll start with awareness and consideration, obviously. So let's say, as a first step of customer journey, building awareness is key, but let's call it a pre-digital world. Usually efforts were put in TV and radio ads, billboards and flyers, and just recently to social media. What is common for these interactions is that they share a generic message of one size fits all to a wide customer market. With digital transformation, customer market data represents sort of a gold mine, and it allows for a much more tailored approach. The very first benefit is that with targeted campaigns in digital media, it is possible to customize the segment of customer market that represents the best fit for what your organization is offering. And further, it's possible to personalize the ads based on the very interest these customers have expressed in their digital footprint. We'll see an example of that just in a second. Additionally, it provides the opportunity to collaborate with different organizations, for example, offering quick loans to customers that show interest in appliance markets together with the appliance resellers. And one of the more recent opportunities is showing interactive ads to clients. So basically how that goes is you allow the client through an ad to select a different color for shoes or furniture that potential customer might be interested in, or having a loan calculator available right there in an ad on the most frequented news portal in the area. And all of that happens even before we have the potential customer onboarded. In other words, we're still talking about anonymous potential customer. Once onboarded, a whole new set of opportunity opens up to further customize the offering, to poll, to look for referrals, etc. So here's an example of a couple of examples based on my interests. So for example, in my digital footprint, obviously, there are keys that are pointing that I would be interested in Harvard Business Schools. That might be something that I have read or something that I have viewed recently on the internet. On the other side, a completely different service is also targeting me, and that would be basically fitness equipment. So I have two different profiles in my digital footprint, and it allows completely different businesses to target me as their potential customer. So let's say that we have built up the awareness and leaped over to consideration phase, and we are ready for customer onboarding. In the next step, traditional approach requires a lot of face-to-face interactions, signing up on-site or at least partially on-site, documentation delivery and review, which are immediately limited with staff availability, with working hours and location proximity, even in pre-COVID-19 era. So employee experience consists also of employees handling the workload on-site and processing data and documents, manually sharing folders, etc. Now let's consider briefly the digital onboarding. Clients are able to sign up whenever they want, so there goes the working hours limitation. They can also sign up wherever they are, so no location proximity limitations. Surely each client will happily fill in their personal data from the comfort of their living room, so employee workload drops immediately. But not only that, with personal data stored digitally, all employees can share the workload or even take over in case primary responsible person is unable to for whichever reason. There's no waiting in line, there is no mandatory space, social distance, employee and customer health is protected, and finally everything is immediately stored in digital form, which is basically an asset in itself. Now, of course, there is no denying that personal face-to-face interaction can play a major role in microfinance operations, in establishing the connection with the customer now more than ever. So this too can be established through a video call, at least to some extent, the service we have all adopted this year, obviously, in one way or another. Once the connection is established, it's easier to maintain in-app interactions as a trustworthy replacement for face-to-face meetings. So let's see how this can actually play out in an example of Leon's digital application. On the screen, we will see now a customer, so basically that's me, scanning a personal document as part of onboarding. So I will scan front side, I will also scan the back side of the document. And the app will then guide me through a sort of liveness test to confirm that I'm a real living person and not just a photograph placed in front of a camera. And here, basically, we can see the list of data picked up from this document. So it happened quite fast. Perhaps I can just start again while I'm talking. So basically, what happens is that we are leveraging OCR technology to pick up the entire data set from the personal document. So the client is actually only required to point his phone towards his personal document and to actually smile a bit and blink a bit, and that's it. Basically 32 seconds or so, and the entire data from his document is already there. Now, obviously, we don't always have to use OCR technology, but even if client was actually clicking on the front side of the document and on the back side of the document and typing in this data manually, it wouldn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes to actually provide all of this data from the comfort of his living room or anywhere else. And let's say now that someone from the back office has actually approved or rejected this client's onboarding request, if that's not done automatically. Perhaps even ask the client to provide a proof of address by sending photos of utility bill through in-app message, which are now available to now already onboarded clients. So now we are getting to another process that is limited nowadays to some extent. And for example, in terms of applying for a service, the client, the customer wants to apply for a service in basically nowadays, he would have to get to the actual office, to a branch, to agree on a meeting with loan officer. Burden on loan officer is still there. The meeting will take time. The customer might want to discuss other options or parameterization of the service that he is applying for. Now, all of this could be streamlined simply by offering such service digitally. Customer is able to play around with the parameters, analyze the service, and think and decide ultimately by applying through, let's say, a web or mobile application. Of course, regulations play a role here as well, whether customer is able to establish a contract completely digitally or some kind of physical presence is still mandatory, but still the benefit is substantial from bypassing the initial meetings and analysis and going, let's say, straight to the business. So here we have another example of a customer being able to see a service for himself, to play around with different parameters available to him by selecting the amount or selecting the loan term that he would like for the loan that he's applying for. And here in this moment, we can see that the client actually sees the entire data related to the service that he's applying for. We have interest rate and total interest, first and final payment date. The client is even able to see the entire payment plan within the application if that is necessary. So basically what we are trying to achieve is make all of the data about the service available to the customer so he can think and decide for himself and then eventually apply once he has made up his mind. Okay, and then we are following up with the customer and application verification. So a standard practice here would be to review case by case, and that cannot change. Each customer requires attention, each application requires review. What can be improved, however, is the way we collect and store data, how we manage it, how we can filter and update the data, track status of a certain case or workloads. So having a single place with 360-degree overview of the client and his applications will simplify the review process and allow for collaboration and shared workloads in between employees. Additionally, key benefit is also to monitor the performance and bottlenecks in order to improve the process further. Customer and application verification model can and should be customized to real business process and then based on metrics iteratively improved. So here's an example of a customer overview. We can see personal details collected through either digital onboarding or through additional interactions. Then we can see all the devices the client has connected, entire correspondence, even client privileges, such as whether the client is able to see all of the services offered, whether the client can see immediately pre-approved loans, etc. You could further integrate overview of all services the client is currently using or has applied for. And here's an example of tracking status of client's application, for example, for KYC, know your customer. Each time there is a change in status, it's recorded and available for anyone with sufficient privileges within the application to see, which also provides the opportunity for easier reporting on current cases in the pipeline, etc. Now we are getting actually to the digital approval and delivery. And here's something that is heavily influenced by regulation. From country to country, regulations change, and it is important to understand what is the current framework for digital onboarding, contract signing, and finally delivery. In the introduction, Zana has briefly mentioned that there is a whole discussion to be had on the state of legal framework for different countries, which is basically underway under the pressure from the market. Now, delivery in itself can be also a challenge. We have seen this previously, but it can also be overcome depending on integrations with payment providers and third-party services. So let's now consider a client that is already using our services. Those services might be short-term or long-term, but either way, we want to provide the best possible experience to those clients in order to have them as recurring clients and sort of ambassadors for the brand and the service. In short, we want to retain those clients and have them as supporters. And another important aspect of digitalization that plays important role here is putting the client in charge. So instead of employees doing the heavy lifting of updating client data, changing personal and contact information, client can easily manage his own profile. Updates can, of course, be verified either automatically, for example, with the contact information. You could simply require the customer to go through the one-time password confirmation of his phone number. If he changes the phone number, he will receive an SMS with one-time password to confirm that he actually owns this contact information. Or verification can be done by employee through tracking of client data update requests. For example, someone would like to change their own address of residency. employee could receive a scan of utility bill or image of utility bill created by the phone app. And surely that will not require the client to come to the office for such changes. So here we have a simple overview of a screen where client is able to actually view his current loan, view details about the loan, and then within the same application, within a couple of taps, the client is also able to completely manage his own profile, from changing his data to setting different notifications or different permissions or selecting different services, etc. Additionally, the chat support and issue tracking are obviously one of the most important aspects of digital transformation, and it can be done completely through digital channels, further reducing the need for face-to-face meetings. So with this brief overview of a customer journey process, we have now gone a full circle from building awareness for a client to actually going through the onboarding and application and basically offering him services that will provide the retention and advocacy that we are aiming for. Another possibility that comes now with the digital transformation is to leverage the existing customers which have already went through the customer journey in order to further raise the awareness of our products and services. And from gathering opinions and reviews over referrals or loyalty campaigns to recurring customers opting for the same service in the future, customer data becomes basically a goldmine that can be used extensively to push the service further and then to leverage it for further digital transformation. Here's a brief overview of basically opting for a quick poll among the customers to see whether or not they are interested in a specific service. If, for example, you're thinking of offering POS loans and you ask the current customer base because they are the best fit for your service currently, to see whether or not they would be interested for it, and then you get a real report with actionable data so you can follow up to those customers with more specific questions regarding your current interest to see how you will move forward with the services that you are currently offering. So having said all of this, how can we actually, what can we conclude from this? So globally, the digital transformation has already shown what it can do for businesses. Just take a look at Amazon and Uber, for example, which are now such old examples that we completely forget that they have completely disrupted their domains. And microfinance institutions are no exception to this, and trends are being set worldwide for new approaches in enabling customers and employees to adapt and to leverage technology in their day-to-day activities. Of course, it's important to note that regulation plays a major role in the reach of digital transformation in the financial world, and it's also important to work towards enabling the regulatory framework around the digitalization of financial services in order to reach its full potential. What we cannot ignore is that the change is here. It's moving fast and the governments are following behind, so we have to prepare and think digitally, because seeing the future, at least short term, is the only way to move forward. And the first step would be identifying what and why to digitalize. And that will immediately lead to answers on when and how to digitalize, which is specific to basically every organization, to every business model, every operation within an organization. So that would be the brief introduction to digital transformation in microfinance and non-bank on my side. Of course, I am open to any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Irfan, for the overview and for this very comprehensive presentation. While we wait for participant questions, I'd just like to know how to offer digital onboarding if, for example, the client still has to sign a contract on site. So what would you suggest then?
I mentioned a bit earlier that there's still a great benefit from offering digital onboarding to customer, even if that is a partial process. So the client can still provide the entire data, and it will immediately, let's say, jump over a couple of steps from customer coming to the branch or the office to see which personal documents are required, which personal data is required, and go back and forth and collect those documents and come back to the office. Obviously, this can be skipped by immediately offering the customer this information. And then when we get to the actual contract signing, obviously with the regulation, it might be necessary for a face-to-face meeting. So either that is on-site, which will take significantly less time in this case, or even agreeing on a meeting on a certain location with the loan officer, or even employing a courier service, which is legally enabled to actually guarantee contract signing and to make sure that it was actually that person that signed the contract. So that is even another option that could be done, of course, completely allowing the clients to do it remotely and not taking up the time of the loan officers and other back office staff from actually having to go ahead and leave the office or take on another client in the office to get the contract signed. So there are obstacles, but there are also workarounds. And while we are working towards, let's say, a regulatory framework that would allow us to move these entire services digitally, we still have the options to, let's say, work around certain obstacles and get faster to the goal that we have in front of us.
So another question is, can we tackle all regulatory requirements using digital channels?
Well, that heavily depends on the regulation itself and what it actually demands from us. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, there are obstacles that need to be overcome, but there are at least, let's call them, ease of use approaches, which will allow the clients to actually get onboarded and apply for a service in an easier way than they would be able to do now. Obviously, what is happening these days in the Western Europe is that we are encountering another wave of lockdowns. And while the regulation might not allow for a completely digital approach, it will significantly allow us to stay in business, so to say, and to provide the service even with the lockdown imposed on all the clients, and obviously reflecting on the employees as well. To every organization,
I agree. Okay, we have a question at the end. I believe you mentioned how to know why, what, and when to digitalize. The question is, how do you know how, why, what, and when to digitalize?
and basically every business process that is being analyzed. So first thing would be involving the right people, and those people are actually those that are working on the issues, on the problems that you are currently facing. So basically first get the right people in the same room or in the same web call, for example, in the current day and age, and then start creating problem statements. What is it that's actually creating a problem for your current business, for your current operations? And once you have those problem statements, that is the why you need to digitalize. Then you will, based on those whys, decide what to digitalize that is taking that plays a major role in those business processes. For example, and this is obviously the most common example here, is that problem statement would be, we are not able to onboard clients if the clients are in lockdown at home. So obviously why we are not able to do it, they are locked away. What we can do, what we can digitalize is to digitalize the onboarding. Now, this is the most the simplest example possible, but that would be the starting point. And then obviously, once you have the why and what you want to digitalize, you will start researching solutions, evaluate pros and cons of a different solution, whether that is allowing digital onboarding and only onboarding through a web application, through a mobile application, or enabling the entire data set, entire digital onboarding and application immediately. Of course, at some point you will have to prioritize what can be done in the short term to enable you to follow up in the long term with additional, let's say, transformations. And once you have the most urgent issues, the most urgent why and what, then obviously that is what you will prioritize first and implement. Once you have at least some results from the initial implementation, you will have to analyze these results and then readjust and iterate. For example, if you are seeing a trend where clients are not onboarding immediately because they lack a certain document that they still cannot obtain while in lockdown, obviously you will enable them through to provide everything else. You will remove this as the obstacle to complete digital onboarding, and then once you have them onboarded, you can communicate with them further and try to work around this problem. So readjust, iterate, analyze again, see what are the problem statements, which part of those problem statements can be transformed, and continue with the process. I don't have actual data.
I do have another question, and it relates to the fact that you mentioned that organizations choose a working system instead of a perfect one. And the question is, do you have any information on how much is security taken into consideration in these cases?
In front of me something that I could refer to, but when I was mentioning opting for a working system instead of a perfect system, obviously I was referring to actually getting parts of the system available and not aiming for the perfect solution that would be from the very first step to the final step completely optimized and completely digitalized. Now, as you mentioned, whoever was asking the question, security plays a major role in this step. Most importantly, because we are allowing clients to provide their personal data, we are allowing clients to apply for a certain service. So that obviously has certain weight to their decisions and to their actions. There are different security options available. There are different security service providers which are in line with current regulations in European Union and in general. So these can be either implemented from the get-go, or there could be a proprietary solution, but obviously there is a certain standard that has to be met. And even with the good enough approach, there are certain things that cannot be circumvented. And that is one of those things is actually security. And another of those things is actually protecting client's data and how it can be stored and how it can be saved. So obviously a certain standard has to be obeyed, so to say.
And yeah, the participant thanks you as well. So what about the documents we still need to exchange in the digital process? And is it supported?
There are quite a few options to support document sharing. Obviously, we have seen an example here in the presentation where client is able to send a document through in-app messages and to receive documents through in-app messages. The possible obstacle, or not really an obstacle, more of a challenge here, is to provide the quality documents here. And there are many options currently available in the market, many libraries and tools which can be integrated in your service, which will allow the client to actually go ahead and scan the document even better, perhaps in some instances, than scanning them on a physical scanner. So obviously it is possible even to have document sharing and to provide the entire documentation from client's living room or wherever the client is currently located, as long as he has those documents on hand. This can be tied further into the whole process of whether the client has provided certain documents, then allow him into the next step of the process, allow him to continue with the application, or keep the client at the certain, let's say, step of the process, even to intervene from the back office to actually contact the client or receive the document from, obviously it doesn't have to be completely provided by the client. Client could send those documents if those documents have to be physically present in your office. So you could scan by yourself in the back office application and simply upload them to still have the entire digital archive for each client. That would heavily depend.
There's another question that usually are the costs of acquisition higher when compared to non-digital channel?
On the current process and the current costs that are being incurred for each client that is onboarding. Obviously, some of the solutions that would be required for digital onboarding would require additional fees, particularly if you are using third-party services such as video calls, such as digital verification of a document, etc. But to a certain extent, these can also be circumvented with client actually providing documentation, typing in the actual data and allowing the back office to scan the data and review the data manually. So there can be a certain compromise in between those cases to make sure that the cost of onboarding customer remains lower than in actual, let's call it, physical, non-digital world. That is, let's say, the good.
What about scaling and automatization in this regard?
The good side of the digital transformation, because once the process is, let's say, put in place properly and adjusted through results, it can be scaled across the organization on different levels, allowing for easier transformation, not only talking about digital, but talking about the actual business process that is taking place, and aligning the entire organization to follow certain, let's call them rules, or let's call them rules, in order to benefit the most from the digital transformation, in order to benefit the most from the standardization that is being, it's a heavy word, but enforced through digital transformation and enforced through use of digital technology.
Based on your experience, which are most common advantages and disadvantages of allowed digital signature by the regulatory of the MFIs? Maybe you want to answer and I can add to this.
Okay, so one of the most common advantages is obviously allowing for a completely digital experience and allowing to streamline the process to let's say 100%. The disadvantage is a possibility for obviously additional requirements. Let's not call it disadvantage, but certain challenge to be met is falling in line with the regulation and obviously having to be in line with standards that are set, being in line with additional security settings that are set, and of course, to a certain extent, having to educate the clients on what the digital signature actually means. You mentioned you would like to add onto this.
On top of what we were saying in the initial introduction, So in Kosovo, for instance, this is very close to be, I mean, the digital signature and the process of approving the legal framework for it is well underway. And we do have institutions that are using this possibility to in their everyday business. Okay, so as far as I can see, this is the last of the questions for the Q&A session. Thank you everybody for your questions. They were amazing. And I would like to thank you, Arsim and Irfan, for your perspective on this topic. And of course, thank everybody for the participation in today's discussion. If there are no more questions, I would, perhaps Irfan can have a couple of words to close your part, and Arsim, of course, you too, and then we can close the webinar.
Well, on my side, I'd just like to thank you once again for this opportunity. It was a pleasure really to talk about this important topic that we are facing day in, day out now in 2020 and most likely for the years to come. So thank you.
Also, just really to thank you, Zana and Irfan, for helping us on organizing this webinar and this session. To all my colleagues and other participants, thank you for basically participating. This is really an important topic on the future development of the sector. We are closely working with the regulator and with everyone else in the country. So basically, as an industry and as a subsector, we are involved. And we will follow up with other webinars on more specific topics on digital transformation of MFI operations. Yes, yeah, really, thank you for being here, and Irfan and Zana, and yeah, till the next time, all the best.
Irfan, and the webinar is now closed.